According to Health and Human Services, over 10,000 people turn 65 every day in America. But do they have to sign up for Medicare? Hi, I'm Larry Goist, owner of LMS Insurance Group, where we help seniors navigate the Medicare maze. So in today's short video, I'm telling you guys all about the Medicare sign up and the penalties that are associated with not signing up on time. And I'm going to break this down into three basic categories. So number one is I'm going to talk about people that are offered coverage from an employer or a union once they turn 65. Number two, I'm going to discuss what you have to do if you are not offered coverage from an employer or a union. And then number three, I'm going to go over the different penalties that are associated if you don't follow the rules set forth by Medicare. And that's all coming up next. Hey, before I jump in, don't forget to hit that like button. Definitely subscribe to the channel, as that's what helps get this message out to others like yourself that would find it helpful. I appreciate you doing that. Thanks. Okay, so the first group of people I'm going to discuss are people that are offered employer or union coverage when they turn 65. Now, in general, this group of individuals, they do not have to sign up for Medicare at 65 if they don't want to. But there are a few things that you have to make sure to avoid penalty. So, number one, if you are offered coverage from an employer or a union, that employer or group coverage has to have at least 20 people or more covered on it. So if you have less than 20 people, you have to sign up for Medicare A and B. But if you are offered coverage from an employer or a union of which there are 20 or more employees, then you don't have to sign up for Medicare at 65. But it's also important to note that whoever you're receiving the insurance from has to be actively employed. So it's only considered credible coverage if you are actively employed, or if you're getting the coverage from your spouse and they are actively employed. But that is the key to delaying without penalty, is whoever you're receiving the coverage from, they have to be actively employed for that to be considered credible coverage to delay Medicare Part A and B. Now, the second part to consider is that coverage you're offered from the employer, it has to be considered as good or better than the coverage offered by Medicare for it to be considered credible. And you could find that out by contacting your HR department, as they are required yearly when you turn 65 to send you a letter which will verify whether or not your employer coverage is considered credible by Medicare. Now, to avoid penalties, you also have to have drug coverage in that plan that is considered credible by Medicare. And the way they determine that is based on four basic things. So, number one, the drug coverage offered by your employer has to cover 60% or more of your prescription costs. Number two, that drug coverage has to offer both generic and name brand drugs. Number three, it has to have pharmacies that are easily accessible by the beneficiary, whether that be local pharmacies or a mail-in pharmacy. It has to be reasonably accessible by the beneficiary. And then number four, your prescription drug coverage cannot have a limit that it will spend in the year. So it can't say, hey, after $2,000, we're not going to pay anymore. There can't be a cap on what your prescription coverage will pay on your employer plan. So if your employer drug coverage meets those four criteria, then that would be considered credible, and you don't have to pick up Part D of Medicare at 65. So people with employer coverage, they do have options. They can pick up Medicare A and B at 65, and they can drop their employer coverage. They could just pick up Medicare Part A at 65, and they could have that pay secondary to their employer coverage. Or they could pick up A and B and have the employer coverage go alongside with it. So if you have employer coverage from active employment from you or your spouse, you don't have to pick up Medicare at 65 as long as it meets the criteria that I just discussed. So the second group of people are people turning 65 that are not offered coverage from an employer or a union. Now, if you're in this group of people, you have got to pick up Medicare Part A, B, and D at 65 to avoid penalties. And if you don't pick it up when you're first eligible, that's where the penalties come into play that you guys see advertised in the mail and on the internet all the time. So no employer coverage equals pick up Medicare when you are first eligible in your initial enrollment period when you turn 65. So what are the penalties if you don't play by these rules? Well, there are two basic penalties that can be assessed to you, the Medicare beneficiary. And the first one is called the Part B late enrollment penalty. Now, this penalty applies to anybody who did not pick up Part B when they were first eligible and they did not have credible coverage, right? So if you didn't have employer coverage, union coverage from active employment, and you also did not pick up B, you will get a penalty. And the way they calculate that penalty is they charge you, the Medicare beneficiary, 10% more than everybody else for every 12 months you go without coverage. So say you went 3 years without Medicare coverage and you were 68. You called me and said, Larry, I want to pick up Medicare now. I want to go to the doctor. I said, that's fine. But because you went 3 years without Medicare, you're going to pay 30% more than everybody else the rest of your life for Medicare Part B. That is a penalty that is permanent. It never goes away. And again, it would be 10% more for every 12 months you go without Part B. The second penalty that you can be assessed is the Part D late enrollment penalty. So again, if you don't pick up drug coverage when you're first eligible and you don't have it from the employer, then you're going to be assessed a Part D late enrollment penalty. I do want to note, though, that for veterans, VA guys, you don't have to pick up Part D because you have drug coverage with the VA. Now, you can pick up Part D, but you don't have to. So the way they calculate the Part D late enrollment penalty is they charge 1% of the national average of a drug plan. In 2023, that number was somewhere around like $32 a month. So they would charge 1% of that number, 1% of 32, and then they multiply that by how many months you went uncovered. So if you went 3 years, sticking to the previous example, you would take $32, multiply it by 1%, multiply that by 36 months, and whatever number you come up with, that would be your Part D late enrollment penalty. And again, you would pay that penalty every month the rest of your life once you picked up Part D prescription drug coverage. So again, these penalties apply to people that did not have credible coverage when they turned 65 and they decided not to pick up Medicare B and or D. Now you might be wondering, well, what about Part A? Well, Part A is free, so there is no penalty for Part A. The only time you're penalized for not picking up Part A on time is if you didn't have the work credits to get Medicare for free, and then you had to buy Part A. So if you're in this rare situation where you didn't have the work credits, you had to buy Part A. Now, if you don't enroll in Part A at 65, then there's a penalty associated with that as well. But that's such a rare thing that happens because that would be for somebody that had to actually purchase Part A. So the penalties that you guys see and the penalties that are going to be applicable to you generally are going to be the Part B late enrollment penalty and the Part D late enrollment penalty. Now, with all these penalties and different rules that Medicare has, how the heck are you supposed to keep track of this? Well, that's what we're here for at LMS Insurance Group. We are a full-service, multi-state insurance brokerage that specializes in the senior market. So if you guys need help figuring out when to enroll, how to enroll, or some of this stuff is just confusing to you, please Use the information listed in the description below. Again, you could always reach our website at lmsbenefits.com or call one of our local offices, as me or somebody on my team would love to help you make great Medicare decisions moving forward. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope this was helpful. I'll talk to you next time. Larry Goist, LMS Insurance Group.